Hello people, welcome back to another sexy video. In today's video I actually have some different and something kinda uplifting to be honest. So I made a meme about furry arguments on Reddit and some people actually had a somewhat decent conversation about the topic. I was shocked, hence the point of this video. Enjoy.
The best furries are the ones who aren't associated closely to the fandom. It is possible to be a furry and not be around that contagious zone that has become the furry fandom. Because ever since the great societal collapse of 2016 through 2020, the furry fandom accelerated its own issues. By adopting the same problems from normal society, the same society that the furry fandom has long sought to gain acceptance from. Well, now they have furry versions of real problems. The furry fandom is its own worst enemy for a long list of reasons.
To me, the furry fandom went downhill after Zootopia came out, in which many people from places like Tumblr managed to get into the community because people made jokes about how the movie would make people into furries. And then the 2016 election happened and they progressively got worse and worse until the fandom ultimately became a caricature of itself. Now it's reverted to the 2008 4chan stereotypes that people once accused them of being. Also they can own the fascists, or whatever their ideological opponent is at the moment. Except it's much worse now that it's heavily baked with Tumblr's toxic ideology where politics and narcissism are prioritized above all else.
The furry fandom's opponents when 2016 happened was that there were alt-right furries and there was a gradual rise in Nazi ideology creeping back in. So you had many furries pointing fingers as to who they thought were a Nazi. They even ousted one of their champions of the furry fandom like that 2 Griffin guy as being a Nazi sympathizer. Technically speaking, he didn't do any favors for himself when he has obsessed over Germany, has made mock-ups of his character doing the salute and more. The other thing too is that the furry fandom had a huge pedo problem for a while. People were begging for Furaffinity to do something about it, but ultimately, nothing was done. It just seemed like the furry fandom rolled with it just like they rolled with zoophiles, because in their twisted logic, condemning them would be like condemning someone from LGBTQ, which really does not compare.
2016 is when the whole culture war started, mostly because the election was between 2 corrupt politicians, one who pandered way too hard to the Tumblr crowd and empowered the Gamergate crowd by making them obsessed with politics, many who were the furries, who came in from Zootopia. Basically, the furry fandom became overtly loyal to Tumblr ideology and it warped the community extremely hard. The biggest problem with the pedo situation is that a large portion of furry circles and groups, including those that run conventions, are ran by pedos. Most of them aren't aware that Furaffinity's current admins are pedos themselves, which is why they didn't do anything about them. But the problem is that a lot of furries don't have any form of self-awareness because they're either too obsessed with politics or too addicted to NSFW content to realize just how bad the community is right now. Because of this, I've largely fallen out of the furry community because it's filled with far too many creeps, weirdos and assholes who think they're better than everyone else and won't speak out against the problems out of fear they will be silenced, ostracized, labeled as istaphobes, or worse.
Oh right, now that you mention all of that, that is pretty true to the timeline. Furries, well the ones from the fandom anyways, have the worst memory lapses of them. The whole the ranting Griffin drama did not start swiftly and immediately. It took furries well over some 3 or 4 years to finally hold the guy accountable for his level of toxicity. Like it took that long for them to even respond to some of the videos he had posted that generated the hate he got from them. They also won't even touch Jason effects over his toxicity because, OMG, they're a talented animator. How can we get rid of that? The porn, guys, the porn. So no, I don't expect furries from the fandom to be aware of the pedo problems or any problems anytime soon if it takes them that long to deal with someone who was once arguably one of their voices of the fandom. Sounds like you're better off from it all.
Past tense. I joined the fandom as a minor in 2016. And I can tell you firsthand that pedos and groomers are still very much a problem. Looking back, I'm grateful that the worst that happened to me was some regretful nude exchange. I feel like this is a lot fairer of an assessment than OP's starter pack.
I've been a furry since 2016, Zootopia, and I definitely agree that the best and least insane furries are ironically the ones that are less associated with the mainstream of the fandom. The fandom have tied themselves very closely to socially progressive, leftist activism, and also their issues, and thus they've adopted many of the same pitfalls as the progressive activists. Issues with inappropriate contact with minors, grooming, extremist leftism, progressive ISM, creating echo chambers, and just generally a violent intolerance towards anyone that doesn't perfectly align with their opinions. I love the concept of anthros and furries, but the fandom is very exclusionary, intolerant, and unwelcoming to people who don't toe the line.
You can blame Tumblr for that, because that site was basically where all the outcasts of the internet went, and they let it brainwash them into being obsessed with politics and constantly going after anyone that doesn't think or act like them. And oh boy, did they get the most drunk on the Tumblr ideology. A lot of them were huge on the gender warfare and orange man bad crap that was big at the time, in which they basically their sexuality and political ideologies their entire personality. And if you didn't agree with them, they would call you an istaphobe, block you, then spread lies about you to ensure they stayed on top. Believe me, I was one of those people that they silenced and ostracized. They can be rather vicious. And the worst part is that nobody is willing to call them out because they'll then use their sexuality as a shield and make it sound like they're oppressed, even when it has nothing to do with the subject being discussed. A lot of them are in the LGBT community, and while I am by no means homophobic, as I have friends who are LGBT, these people have a tendency to weaponize it for attention and clout. It really doesn't help that they're very adamant about being weird and horny on main at all time, in which they are incredibly hostile towards anyone who draws primarily SFW art or chooses to be family friendly, wanting to ensure that it's an 18+ adults only community, which itself comes off as a childish idea of what being an adult is, where it's just sex and drinking non-stop and none of the responsibility of being an adult. And a lot of them who think that way end up being pedos, and for some reason never get caught, because like I said earlier, they use their sexuality as a shield from criticism. If anything, the furry fandom has less to do with anthro animals now and more to do with toxic Tumblr ideology. They're so drunk on it they're basically driving under the influence, and somehow they don't get caught.
My 10-year-old daughter is genuinely into dressing up as animals with mask, tail and paws. She makes her own props from paper, but recently a few of her friends bought some from Amazon. She also makes paper dragons. They play for hours, getting into their roles as different characters with drama and adventure. Sometimes upstairs in the Lego room, sometimes on the phone while playing in various Roblox games, and also sometimes in the garden, especially on the tree swings. The amount of quality time these girls produce like this is beyond anything I ever experienced at that age. They are super creative, they bond really strongly as friends, and they create lots and lots of positive core memories together. If this is what furries is all about, then I am all for. There are going to be R34, porn, abuse, internet humor, deranged outcast in any culture, just like there are extremists in every religion. I will keep my eyes peeled, but so far this is a good thing.